Thank you guys so much. We're so excited to be here today. Man, I want to introduce myself and Purnell and Kim. Most of you in the crowd already know everybody up here, but would love to talk through that, give a quick intro, and kind of talk through why we're up here, what we're going to talk through, give a brief outline about some of the questions we're going to ask you guys. So we are going to have a pause during this talk to have you guys write a few things down. Then we're going to try to share some of those things collectively through a microphone, and would love your participation with that. We don't want this to be a speech for an hour. We want it to be a facilitation, a conversation we're having where we're going back and forth, and it's a communal aspect here. So my name is Billy Van Eaton, as she said. I am the CEO of Cumberland Landscape Group, and we have been around for about 11 years in the Atlanta market. We do commercial maintenance, design build, and then commercial construction. We have Purnell here on my left. Purnell is a man that I recruited for 5 years, just a wonderful guy, a father of three, and he's got 3 boys, and he's worked in the industry for over 25 years, from Texas all the way over to Georgia. He's from Augusta, and he started his career at Augusta National, which is a really great spot for any golfers out there or non-golfers. Obviously, everybody knows what Augusta National is. It's killer. And then Kim Jenkins, she has been in the industry also for over 25 years. Both these folks started very young, and they've worked their way through the industry, and it's wonderful. Kim is our president of operations, or president of the company at Cumberland Landscape Group, and Purnell is the head of operations. And we're excited to talk through pruning on the landscape side, horticulture side. We also want to talk through kind of pruning in your business and your life, what this looks like, and some of these hard things we have to do to try to help us have healthier growth. Would love to, our outline real quick, is we're going to talk through pruning and then rejuvenation pruning. We're going to have 1 to 2 minutes to write down 1 to 2 things that we kind of need to prune in our business. And then we'll give you prompts for those, some examples of what that looks like. And then we're going to talk through a few more questions about what are some of those things. Again, you guys are hopefully going to get up and give us a few conversation points through the microphone about some of these things that need to be pruned, maybe some things you have pruned before. And then we're going to wrap it up talking about sequoia trees that are out west, and then we'll close out our time with questions. So thank you so much for having us here today, and we'd love to turn it over to Purnell.
Thank you, Billy. All right, guys. So as Billy mentioned, we want to talk about pruning as it relates to landscaping. Right, we all know that pruning is a necessary line item that we have to perform on a recurring basis. For number one, it provides an aesthetic appearance to the property. Number two, is very beneficial to the plant material as a whole. Where we talk about pruning in terms of promoting new growth. We talk about pruning as far as sustainability. Right, so we're going to talk through all of those things as we look through these slides. And as Billy mentioned, I wanted this to be interactive. I don't want it to feel like it's something I'm just lecturing you guys about. I want it to be really interactive. I want to engage you guys a little bit and ask some questions. So be prepared. So I may call on you guys to kind of chime in a little bit here. So what we'll do, we'll go ahead and click into our first slide as we look at pruning inside of the landscape, right? So this next slide, everybody's going to be familiar with this picture. We've all seen it, right? Everybody knows what this is. What is it? What is it called? Crepe myrtle, exactly. Is this what we really want to be doing in the landscape? No? Definitely not, definitely not. So as you look at this picture, right, it says a lot of different things. So it tells me that there's some real, common misconceptions as it relates to pruning in general, right? So typically when you see this type of pruning done, it's usually done in a residential setting for the most part. And a lot of that reason is because homeowners themselves have a misunderstanding of the proper way trees and shrubs should be pruned. And this is one of the things that has been happening for years and years. I see it all across town, right? So when you look at this and you talk about the proper way of pruning, you want to educate the customer in terms of how this particular plant should be maintained, right? We want to encourage proper pruning techniques, and this is certainly not what we would expect to see in our landscapes. So again, as you look at this, we want to go into the misconceptions a little bit. So can you guys tell me about some of the main misconceptions that you hear within inside of the landscape when you're talking to customers as it relates to crepe myrtle? It's got to be pruned every year. Exactly right. What's that? Yes, exactly right. That's exactly right. So again, a lot of the misconception comes from, this is what I've always heard is this is the way we've always done it, right? We've been doing it this way for years. We do it this way because it promotes larger blooms, The tree grows back a lot more full than it typically does if you didn't cut it back this severely. And all those things are right, but what we want to be sure is that we're not going this drastic, right? There's no need to prune a tree this drastic, because trees, you want to make sure that the canopies are symmetrical, right? You want to make sure that the cross branches are being taken down out of the interior of the plant, because that promotes healthier blooms that allow sunlight and air to pass through that plant, which are all healthy for that particular plant, okay? So here on our next slide, you can see a crepe myrtle that's really healthy, right? And this is what we want. This is what we want to see within inside of our landscape. Can you guys tell me some of the characteristics that make this healthy? Tell me about this plant in general in terms of what you guys see. Very full, yes. Wide canopy, yes, yep. Large blooms, absolutely. Right, so again, when I look at this crepe myrtle, and say the canopy is pretty clean, it's very symmetrical from the base. It's got a lot of good blooms on it. The foliage looks really good. I don't see a lot of knuckles, which typically you would see those on crepe myrtles that have been cut back really hard. During the winter, they have these knuckles, and they tend to stay there until it starts to promote new growth. I see no suckers at the base of the tree, and I see no signs of disease or fungus, which typically would be like a sooty mold or something like that you would see on a crepe myrtle, which is this either white powdery mildew or some black type of residue that you'd see, which is basically the secretion from the insects. So this is what we want to promote with inside of the landscaping. It's really healthy for the plants, right? And again, it just promotes a healthier aesthetic value to the property. So rejuvenation pruning. This is what some of you guys are probably doing right now inside of the landscape, right? You guys are going through this as part of your winter process, making sure that plant material that has all of a sudden outgrown its space is really being maintained and pruned and cut back to the proper desired height, right? So when you're in commercial settings or residential settings, can you guys tell me, like, what are some of the reasons why you would cut back plant material so drastically?
Keep it away from the vehicles.
Security purposes, keep it away from the vehicles. Anybody else? Jake? Not blocking the windows, yes. Over the curves, off the buildings. So in this particular setting, you can see this is in more of a commercial setting. It looks like it's a parking lot island, right? You can see how some of the plant material is kind of outgrown in space. So you want to go and do a really, really hard rejuvenation pruning for, number one, to bring that plant material back into its original scope. Number two, to provide more clearance, so it's better visibility as you look out across a parking lot, right? Which again promotes safety, right? And again, it's very healthy for this plant, because when you look at from a cost-effective standpoint, most customers, or most of your residential customers, they don't really have it budgeted to go in and do a full redo on their landscaping. So this is a great cost-effective alternative to that, is to go in and do this hard rejuvenation pruning, which again is going to be ultimately beneficial for the plant as it starts to restore itself. It's going to come back, which is you see on that picture to the far right, which is lush, right, more vibrant, but then it's within the scope. It doesn't look overgrown. It looks well maintained. So this is what we want to look for when we talk about, the rejuvenation pruning as it relates to the landscaping. So with that being said, what are you guys seeing out there that's really beneficial outside of the things that we just talked about? What are some of the other things that you guys have seen that makes it beneficial to do this type of pruning? Cost effective? Yes, very much so. Very cost effective, yes. More plant life, yep. Right, so all those things are very beneficial when it comes to, rejuvenation pruning, right? A lot of the times, especially in the residential setting, you have plant material that's kind of planted across the foundation of properties, the foundation of buildings, right? A lot of that plant material starts to get out of scope, and homeowners want to revive that property. They want to rehab it, but they're working with a really tight budget. So this is one way of bringing that plant material back into scope. It opens up the architectural features of that design, of that property, in terms of how it was originally intended to look. So it's very beneficial in that way. And again, it's just overall healthy for the environment and the landscape in general. So when you talk about rejuvenation pruning and selective pruning, which is what we're looking at with the crepe myrtles again, You don't want to go in and cut them back too severely because they are living, as Kim say, living organisms. So we want to make sure that we're very much aware of that. And again, trees are made to be seen through, not seen over the tops of them. So cutting them back that drastic, it really has no real benefit to the plant, right? But if you maintain this plant properly, it's going to yield much better blooms and a lot less material as far as the head goes. So we want to roll into, again, pruning for healthier growth. So as we talk about pruning inside of the landscape, again, when you guys are out doing your normal duties throughout the course of the week, and you guys are doing your rotational pruning, it is very important that we understand how to prune, why we're doing it, and timing is also critical, right? Timing is everything, as we know, because the one thing we don't want to do is we don't want to go in and do hard pruning as plants and flowers are starting to bud out, right? That's when they're starting to produce energy. That's going to cause more harm. So we want to do that when they're lying low, they're dormant, they're not producing as much energy as they normally would during the season. That is the prime time to go in and do your rejuvenation cutbacks to allow that plant material to come back nice, strong, and healthy, okay? Do you guys have any questions on any of this? Any questions? Anybody? No? Billy? Any questions? Kim? Okay. Well, very good. So what we'll do is we'll roll into our next slide. And I want to call Ms. Kimberly Jenkins up here, and she's going to take us through our next level of pruning. She's going to talk about pruning as it relates to business, and she'll take it from here. Thank you, guys.
All right, we got some feedback. Good afternoon. So I'm going to change gears just a little bit here, and as Purnell mentioned, we're going to talk about pruning in our lives and pruning in our businesses. So the reason why we prune plant material, right, as we all know, is in order to allow the plant to grow healthier and stronger. And it's really the same reason why we want to prune in our businesses and in our personal lives, right? So a few years ago, I had the pleasure of attending a course at the Leaders Lyceum. And it was a little bit different than other management courses in that, we didn't focus on a whole lot of, hey, concepts of here's how you do certain things. They didn't leave us with a bunch of to-dos, but what they did have us focus on was two things. And one of those things was to really think about what's important in our lives, right? What really matters to us at the end of the day. And make sure that we are eliminating or pruning the things out of our lives that don't matter, right? That don't help us achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And number two was how we seize those challenges and those contradictions in our lives to use them as an opportunity to be a greater person, to be a greater leader. And this is the formula that they shared with us. And it's this concept of challenge and contradiction, right? When you're faced with those challenges and those contradictions in your life, that over the course of time, when you bump that up against perseverance, right? When you push through those hard times, it leads to this elevated leadership. It leads to this elevated growing as a person, right? And we're all going to face challenges. We're all going to face contradictions in our lives. But how we respond to those is what really matters, right? Do we use those as an opportunity to grow through them? Do we use them as an opportunity to lean into them and accelerate that growth? And that was really the concept that they really drilled into us in this course. And I'm not going to get into all the psychology. This thing went on for 3 months, and a lot of psychology that was built in behind it. We're not going to talk about that today. But what I do want to talk about is that challenge and that contradiction and leaning into that, right? When we're faced with challenges, our natural tendency is to draw back, right? We don't want to deal with whatever it is that we have to deal with, right? And so we understand that is the challenge, right? We all face challenges every day. But what do I mean when I talk about contradiction? Does anybody know? So when we talk about contradiction here, what we're talking about is when we're forced to reevaluate the way that we see things in life, right? Forces us to kind of take off that lens that we see life through and reevaluate it. is the way that I have always envisioned this accurate? Is it the right way for me to run my business, right? And taking a step back and really questioning that just because this is the way we've always done something doesn't necessarily mean that's always the best method of going forward, right? So reevaluating through that contradiction can allow us to grow. So rather than taking a step back and hiding from these challenges that we face in life, to be able to lean into them, and I mean lean into them hard, right, will allow us not only to grow as individuals, but it will also allow us to elevate that growth and allow us to grow faster and become better leaders. Okay, so when I think about, what are the challenges that you're faced with in life, right? If you think about those. So for some of us, that may be public speaking, right? And if you're fearful of public speaking, then you should ask your boss to volunteer you to come and speak publicly at Synced Live, right? It's a great way to overcome that. Or be voluntold, right? So when we think about that, right, if we know that the best way for us to grow as leaders and as individuals is to lean into those hard times, right, and really push up against them, then why don't we do that, right? What are the things that make it hard for us to make those hard decisions in our lives, whether it's in our personal life or whether it's in our business lives? What is it? What is it that makes it hard? So there's a comfortness, right? You're comfortable and you don't want to make the change. What else? Fear. Fear? Great one. Right? I'm scared of what might happen. How about others? Can we think about others? How about in our personal lives? What about maybe the right decision for us as a family is that we downsize our house, right? But I don't want to do that because the fear of, hey, what about the Joneses next door? What are they going to think if I sell my house and I downsize? Right? So sometimes we're hindered by what others perceive. And so that makes us fearful in making those changes. Can we think about others that keep us held as hostage in those situations? What was that? Habits. Oh, great one, habits. Right? And we hear that all the time. How many of you guys hear that from your team at work? Right? Well, this is the way we've always done it. Right? And hey, we can be just as guilty as leaders of falling into that habit. But just because that's always how we've always done it doesn't mean that it's not a good opportunity for us to pause and reevaluate and ask ourselves, yes, that's the way we've always done it, but this is the right way for us to do it as we move forward. And is there a better way for us to do it? Okay, any others? Can you think of other reasons? Who was that? Effort? Right, too much effort. I don't want to work that hard. Right, that takes way too much effort. How about comfort? Sometimes we're just comfortable. You're settled in life, right? You don't want to step outside of that comfort zone. What about doubt? Do we sometimes doubt ourselves as leaders? Am I making the right decision? Is this really what's going to be best for our business? Complacency? How about just worry and fear? Right? We're just scared, right? And that holds us hostage sometimes as well. So think about what we could achieve if we weren't hindered by worry and fear, if we weren't afraid of what was going to happen, right? Any others? I think you guys hit most of them on my list. All right, so if we know how that when we have these challenges and these contradictions in our lives, right, if we know that we need to bump up against them and to overcome them, and we understand what holds us hostage, then how do we go about doing it, right? So here we've got some bullets on some ways that we can approach that. So number one is start with a vision, right? What is it that I want for my life, right? What is it that I want for my team? Have I shared that vision with my team? Have I written down my goals? How do I know if I'm working towards those goals or not? So set the vision, right? And communicate that vision. We are much more inclined to make things happen when we write them down, right? How many of you guys have to-do lists, right? When you put it on your to-do list, it gets done. You feel good about earning that check mark, okay? Number two, don't be afraid to cut out what doesn't belong. What's keeping us from our vision? Where are we spending our time? You know, we may want to volunteer, but maybe we're over volunteering. We're volunteering for too much. And now we don't have the time in our lives to think about or to focus on the things that are really important to us. And so take inventory of those items. Where am I spending my time? Am I spending my time on the things that are going to help me achieve my goals? When it comes to your team members, right? Do your team members share the same vision that you do? Number 3, sometimes we have to prune away the good in order to grow the best. Now, this one's really easy to talk about, but really hard to apply, right? Because there are so many good things in life that we want to spend time doing. But again, are we focusing on the things that are going to enrich our lives, that are going to help us be better people, and that are going to help us achieve our goals? At work, we need to focus on, again, high-quality meetings that have a focus, right? Rather than long, drawn-out meetings and we don't get anywhere, right? And hey, we're all still learning, right? We're all still growing. Number 4, prune out the sick and the disease. Now, this one's really easy to recognize, but really hard to achieve. So this one is about, our own personal habits and addictions, right? And we all have them, right? We all have those things about ourselves that we want to change, but it's really hard. But making those decisions to make those changes, right? Making those decisions to overcome those habits and overcome whatever addictions hold you hostage are going to help you grow. And frankly, if those things aren't addressed, they're just going to continue to linger, and they're going to continue to grow, and they're going to hold you hostage, and they may ultimately destroy us, right? So we want to find a way to get past those. And how do you do that, right? So leaning into your support system, right? Sharing with your support team, hey, here are the things that I'm struggling with, whether it's your family at home, whether it's a coworker at work, but sharing with them, these are my struggles, and this is what I'm trying to overcome. Okay, and at work, look at the employees that surround you, right? Are they struggling with burnout? Do they have heavy workloads? Do they have unrealistic personal expectations? Sometimes those people need to be exited out of our business. Sometimes they just need a little counseling. They need to be moved to a different role within the organization. Number 5, focus on the short-term vision rather than the long-term vision rather than short-term gains. So this is about, we get caught up in our whirlwind, right? We know what the goal is. We know what our vision is. But then daily life happens, right? And we get so caught up in the whirlwind that we lose focus. And we become reactive on what's right in front of us right here, right now. And again, we forget to focus on that long-term vision that we're growing towards. So again, think about what is the long-term vision, and make sure that the things that you're working on a daily basis align with that. And then the last thing that I will leave you on this, it's not up here, but I would just like to say, and I heard it earlier today with one of the other speakers, is embrace the no, right? Embrace the no. Warren Buffett once said, the difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. So think about that. Okay, so we are going to take a 2-minute pause, as Billy said earlier. And, I want you guys to think about what are the things in your lives, whether it be business, whether it be personal, that you need to prune. Right? And I want you guys to write those down or make a note on your cell phone, because we're going to come back and we're going to go around. We're going to have a little bit of sharing here in a few minutes, and we're going to share what those things are. Okay, so 2-minute pause.
As a little bit of a teaser, we're also going to talk about pruning in their business, but also maybe in your lives, like Kim was talking about. So these things might be something in work where maybe it's a bad system or something that needs to be redone, or accounting system, or a skid steer that needs to be thrown away and another one bought. Right, Corey? Or maybe 6 of those. So it might be something like that, or it might be just in our own lives, like Kim was talking about, some of these vices we have, or some unhealthy habit, or or pattern we have. All right, so we'd love to go around. We have Kim and Purnell walking around with microphones, also a microphone over here on the right, if you want to speak into there. But we would love for you guys to share over the big HVAC unit. Love for you to share 1 to 2 things that you wrote down that you need to prune in your business or in your life, or something going on in your life like that. We'd love for you to share with the rest of us.
So, something on a personal level, kind of put my life in the last 6 months. Branch manager on the east side, kind of have that empowerment. Stopped going out to lunch every day, stopped cut out lunches, and cut out eating out a lot. So, and that's made a big change in my personal life with my daughter, being home and cooking. So there's been some benefits that were unknown. My bank account's bigger, and my time with my family is bigger. So that's been great. And then something on the professional side that it's in the last couple of years that I've noticed, I've cut out the self-doubt, being in business. Being in business development, not taking things personally, because no today doesn't mean no in 6 weeks or in 6 months. So I've kind of like let that slide out my back, and that's kind of really helped me professionally. And so those are 2 things that I've turned out in my life.
Those are awesome, guys. That's great.
Thank you for sharing.
Don't be shy.
Come on, Jay.
All right, let's see. I think I need to prune a little more in my personal life with my kids to try 4 and 5. So they can be annoying little kids, a lot. You know how 4 and 5-year-olds are. But I'm trying to make it where I can have more quality time with them to try to grow them a little more, because they're little sponges right now. So I just need a little more patience with them and get them to really, spend a little more quality time, I feel like, with them to help them grow a little more as, while they're little kids. So that's kind of what popped up in my head.
Great, I love it, Jay. We've got 3 young kids also, so I definitely can identify with all those statements.
Well, so the one thing that I need to prune is all the applications and monthly things that I pay for that I don't even know what they are. So I sat down the other day and thought about this, and I'm like, I pay for so many silly things that I don't even need. So that's one thing that I'm going to work on.
Just like Rush, you're gonna have a bigger bank account, which is great.
How about bad or unprofitable customers? All right, how many of those do we have? All right, those customers that you pay to do their job. Who wants to pay to do somebody's work? Great one to cut out for this new year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're losing money on a job, the way we look at it, you're literally paying someone to go cut their grass. That is the opposite direction that's supposed to go. That is a great pruning that allows for new growth for a company.
Negative people, is that what you said, Cindy?
How about pruning off the customers that create a lot of the drama and trauma in your work life?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, Cindy, so there are some customers, right, that they may make up, 2% of your revenue, but maybe they make up 80% of your complaints. Is that a good customer to keep? No, it's not. We're fine with complaints, that happens, but it's that skewed, that becomes a real problem.
Right, your employees will feel better and have a better work place. Start with, getting rid of customers that are creating a lot of that.
Yeah, very much.
And how true is that, right? How many times, I don't know if you guys have experienced in your own personal businesses, but you have that toxic employee that stays around for longer than they should, right? And you start to see the drain on the rest of the team. And then as soon as they're gone, the mood is lightened, right? And there's a rejuvenated spirit in the organization, right? So again, that doesn't mean that they're bad people. Just sometimes we're in the wrong space, right? And sometimes it's hard for us to admit that to ourselves, right? And so sometimes some of the best things that could happen to us is for our boss to come along and prune us out, right? It forces us, again, to bump up against that contradiction of what we hold to be true, which is, hey, this is where I'm going to work forever, right? This is my home. This is where I'm going to retire from. Maybe it's not the best space for you anymore. Maybe it used to be, but now it's not, right? So it's really hard sometimes to make those decisions. And sometimes you recognize that you have an employee that's not willing to do that themselves. And so you have to make that decision for them.
I want to tell a quick story about, for us, this was maybe 6 years ago, we expanded into Nashville. And we were really excited. We had a client take us up there. A business developer was with us, and he took us up there. It was fantastic. We were so excited. So we go up to Nashville. We start this branch. We hire a branch manager from a competitor. He is awesome, Rob. And then I got Michael was our sales guy. And so Michael was helping us sell up there. Fast forward through some of the story, Michael ended up having brain cancer, which was terrible. It was awful. He also started a company on the side, and that became a problem for us. And so we lost all these jobs that we had bid on up in Nashville. And we were faced with this problem where we had this big pipeline that we were expanding up. They were faced with, where'd these sales go? What's happening here? Why are these falling off the radar? Why are we not closing these? What's happening up there? And that branch was tanking. And we found out that, hey, these contracts are going to him and not to us. That's a problem. Our accountant said, you have a situation here you have to face. You're losing a ton of money by having this Nashville branch, and you're not going to hit your sales number on this. And in order to rebuild this branch, it was going to take a year and a half of potentially trying to build up that market and getting enough of a pipeline to help us grow that branch. And it just felt like that was not going to work well for us. Like we were reeling from pain from this whole experience. And so we had to make the hard choice of cutting revenue, so cutting out that Nashville office, which was terrible, but we actually increased profitability and stability at the company. Like it was a terrible experience for us. It hurt a lot. It was painful. But when we were talking to our accountant, I said, so if we, thinking about pruning again, so if we prune this branch that we were so excited to have and this revenue and this opportunity we have, if we prune this off of us, then we'll actually be a healthier, more stable company. That is hard, but that's the decision we have to make. And so I think that's some of what we're talking about up here is this pruning is hard. It's emotional. It hurts. It's bloody. It's all these different things. But, man, if we didn't do that, it potentially would have taken down the company. Or who knows what would have happened. But it would have been far, far worse than it ended up being. And so we want to encourage you guys to be thinking about this pruning. I mean, it's hard. So as we keep going through, we've shared some about our business side and some about our kind of personal side. So in that example, we have these voluntary and involuntary prunings that happen. That example was an involuntary pruning. We did not choose to have that happen in Nashville. We did not want to shut that down. That was not our choice. But we were confronted with this with the situation, and we had to make a choice. On the other side, we have these voluntary prunings that we do. So it's kind of what everybody talked about in here, which is great. I heard a few themes about cutting out some of this time so I can spend more time with my young kids. That's a great one, cutting out some of these things where we're just kind of wasting money potentially and not using it, and so we're saving more money. Fantastic. That's a great change. So all these are awesome. Those are voluntary. And my thought is, man, I would much rather be voluntarily pruning this stuff than for something bad to happen, and maybe it's an involuntary pruning that's much harsher. And so I think that I'd love for us to share some more about some voluntary prunings. Where are these areas in our lives where we want to say, hey, I want to actively choose to do this. I actually want to actively grow and be healthier, and this is going to hurt. I'm going to do without the Starbucks coffee, but we want to be able to go forward and have a healthier bank account, spend more time with our kids. Would love to share maybe 2 or 3 things, if possible, from you guys in the crowd about what are some of these areas you want to voluntarily prune as well. Or if you want to share a story about an involuntary pruning that happened, because that's happened to all of us in different ways.
Well, since I have the mic, I guess I'll go Billy over here. Hey. Yeah, so when I hear you talking about pruning, it makes me think a lot of the different stresses that we have in life. And I don't think of all stress as a negative. I think there are positive stresses too. So when I'm thinking of what am I pruning out of my life, I'm really thinking about the negative talk that I do to myself, the negative thoughts that I have, and trying to figure out how to call attention to when those moments arise, and then shift the narrative on the inside and prune out that negative and try to really focus on something a little more positive. So that's what I would have.
I love that mentality too, right?
So I use that a lot with my daughter at home, right? When she's 13, so she's negative about everything, right? But when something bad happens to her, right, we do what I call count your blessings, right? And so we try to take that negative situation and turn it into positive, because at the end of the day, there's always something that is positive in our lives, right? Sometimes we have to look for it a little bit harder than others, but there's always something to be positive about. So when you make that mental shift, right, you force yourself to say, hey, I'm not going to look at it in this negative way. Yes, all these things are going wrong, but let me find the light, right? And when you focus on that, you feel better, right? And it helps and gets you rejuvenated and helps you push forward. So I love that, Jasmine. I love the talk that you give to yourself and flush out all that negative energy.
Anybody else have anything they want to share on involuntary and voluntary prunings in their lives? These are great.
Yeah, Billy, I would talk about, for me, it would be getting rid of the victim mentality, right? Because a lot of times when things don't always go your way, you have a tendency to ask why. You know, why did this happen, right? Why didn't it go the way that I expected it to go? You know, and you have a tendency to want to blame other people, right? Other reasons why things didn't go your way. So getting rid of that victim mentality and understanding that you're in control of everything that you do, you're in control of everything that you have, right? If you take that mindset over the victim mentality mindset, you're going to be more prosperous, right? You're going to be more just better all around, I think, right? When you think about what we try to achieve in our daily lives, whether it be at work, whether it be in our personal lives, you know, if you think about removing that, just that whole negativity cloud, right? And think more positive. To me, positive things happen when you think that way. So for me, it will be just kind of removing that victim mentality, so to speak, right? Right? Why don't I have these things, right? Or why didn't I get that, right? So just understanding where you are, right, in your journey, and think more positive than negative. That's my opinion.
Love that, Purnell. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that's great. All right, so we'd love to move through kind of one of our last slides here and then have an open time for questions. So in researching pruning, as we're thinking about, hey, what are some of these things that need healthy pruning? Maybe there are things that the environment does that we're not aware of, and we don't have these here, but these are sequoia trees. These are all on the West Coast, and they have some in Mexico. But these sequoias are huge. I've never seen them. I would love to go see them. But they can live to be, the oldest one that we've found has lived to be 3,200 years. 3,200 years old. That is an old tree, dude. I mean, that is super old, and these trees have 2-foot thick bark. That's crazy. So these trees are these like behemoth trees that have grown forever, that exist out in the woods. And what they've found that's fascinating, or I find fascinating, is that when the Native Americans lived in that area 100 or 200 years ago, either there would be fires that would be started by lightning, or they would start their own fires to burn the underbrush. The underbrush, either from the lightning or the folks that were out there, that cleans up the underbrush and allows these plants to actually grow healthier. But one of the things it also does is these sequoia pods, these seed pods, they're really tightly packed, and they hang up in the tree. And whenever these massive wildfires occur, not these small fires, but the big wildfires, they actually help to kind of cook and dry out these seed pods that allow the seed pods to crack and then drop their seeds. And without doing that, we wouldn't have as many sequoias as we have. So I found fascinating, sequoias are really a byproduct of hard, heavy pruning that happens, and these fires that happen. They cause destruction, but in a lot of areas, they cause new life. I think that we've talked about here with these prunings in our lives and our businesses, like they're hard, they're fires, they hurt, but man, they can bring new life. They can bring new seeds, and that is a new hope for us. And so I think when we look at these sequoias, I think we want to think about ourselves. Who doesn't want to be something that lives, we're not going to live 3,200 years, but who doesn't want to be this big sequoia in the wilderness, this kind of massive tree that shelters everyone that, I mean, what a fantastic, beautiful piece of nature that we have. You know, one of the things that when I think through pruning, we had, you know, in pruning, at least for me in my life, as I talked with Purnell and Kim, you know, some of these things that happen, they take a long time to process. And when we're processing these things, the hope, at least I think, is that we eventually get to a place of, man, I'm grateful that happened. Even though it was incredibly painful, I'm grateful that happened. Years ago, 6 years ago, it was a big time in our life, I guess, but we had our first kid in that process, and then we had another company that we'd started, and that company failed. And it was miserable. And I got kicked out of the company. It was not a good situation. Came home, told my wife, not a great conversation to have. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I felt really buried and pretty lost. And we still had Cumberland at the time, but this other deal was a total dud. Fast forward 5 years. I say it took me a good 5 to 6 years. I'm still processing some of it, but 5 to 6 years to start to really process some of the fruit from that experience. And I wrote last year, I wrote, man, I am so grateful that loss happened. I never thought I would actually journal that I was glad that happened, because the amount of pain that it caused me, my family, our employees, our investors, customers, the whole gamut. It was incredibly painful. But the lessons that it taught me, the lessons that it taught us, helped us to be a better leader, a better husband, father, CEO, manager. And I think that's the way a lot of these prunings can be. Just like we talked about with Purnell, that crepe myrtle showed, it's been pruned over and over through the years. It has a beautiful bloom. It's huge, big canopy, huge flowers. And that's a byproduct of this constant pruning over and over, and this healthiness that's been put into the plant. And I think that our lives are the same way, or our businesses are the same way, that we want to be feeding this healthy stuff in there, pruning out the dead and disease, and helping it to grow and flourish like these big sequoias that we have. In COVID was one of the, definitely an involuntary pruning that all of us experienced. And, there's a buddy of mine runs a fundraising company for schools. And so they do school fundraising, school fun runs for elementary schools, which are in-person events. So in COVID, they got crushed. They went from crushing it revenue-wise to falling off a cliff. They went, I think, 6 months without revenue. I remember hearing him talk. He said, his name's Chris, and he said, I don't know. He said, I told my wife one day, it's not that we're going to go out of business. We're going to go bankrupt. We have no money, no revenue. This is really bad. We don't know when COVID's going to ease up. We don't know what's going to happen. And this is a few years after. It's probably 2 years after he went through this initially. And I asked him about it. He wrote a quote to me, and it was quick, but I love the simplicity in his wisdom. He said, it was good for me, my family, and us. Praise God. Pruning. I hope it never happens again. I think that's the way we feel about these hard prunings in our lives. Man, praise God. I am so glad for the fruit from that, but I do not want to go through that pain again. I don't want to go through the pain of losing a business, or if there's a spouse or a sibling or whatever these big losses we have. We do not want to go through that again, but I think the hope is that we get to the other side of that and we can say, man, praise God, this is healthier, and we've had healthier growth from there. So that's our hope. So we'd love to open up for questions with Kim and Purnell, and if you guys have any questions for us, love to answer them about pruning or anything. Would love to be a soundboard. Thank you guys for having us up here also. If you have questions, raise your hand. If not, we'll close out the time. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. It's a pleasure to be up here, and thanks for coming.